Christian, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Jamie, and thank you for having me.
What fate faces today's EV batteries at the end of their life? I'm joined today by Dr Christian Marston, who's the COO and co-founder of Altilium Clean Technologies, as we discuss the importance of battery recycling and decarbonising our supply chains. There's talk of new batteries eventually being made from old ones, and the demand on mining of raw materials to be heavily reduced, if not entirely removed, in just a couple of decades' time. So we're here today to unpack everything, run through some statistics and the outlook. So we hope you enjoy. I look forward to getting deep into the recycling topics today, a slightly new area for us on the show, which is great. So first of all, Christian, talk us through your journey so far and the reason for co-founding Altilium.
I spent 13 years managing energy products business and raw materials trading for a Japanese trading house, and I became aware of the challenges and risks posed by the growing demand for critical minerals. And also I saw that there was a shift towards sustainability was needed. Actually, my background is technical. I have a PhD in material science. So I became interested in applying, how we can use material science to solve the challenge of getting to net zero. And, batteries are quite interesting because we can recycle them at very high efficiencies, and we can do that indefinitely. So we can really create a circular economy for batteries, which reduces the dependency on mining, and it allows us to recycle these existing waste streams into valuable low carbon raw materials, which is needed for the UK energy transition and also our industrial resilience.
At a high level, to start off with, introduce Altilium to us and your mission.
Yeah, so ultimately Altilium is looking to give the UK high volumes of domestic anode and cathode raw materials to put back into a supply chain to build new batteries, and that allows us to electrify transport and the grid and get to net zero. So ultimately our mission is to close the loop on an EV battery value chain by offering domestic sources of critical minerals. We aim to build scalable, low-carbon battery recycling technologies and an ecosystem in the UK. And, our ultimate goal is to support the transition to a greener, more sustainable energy future for transport and the grid.
Something we talk about a lot on the show is how quickly the battery industry is scaling outside of Asia. So particularly North America and Europe, we're talking about how the future is going to look, how we're going to staff all these gigafactories, where the materials are going to come from, how sustainable is the supply chain going to be. And I think a huge element of all that is recycling, to create a local supply chain and have less reliance on mining critical materials. So to begin with, can you kind of paint a picture of the current status and capability of battery recycling globally? And as an example, for an EV battery end of life today, what fate can it expect?
So if we look globally, the battery recycling industry is still at its early stages. The main infrastructure from a hydrometallurgical viewpoint is in China. They have over 1 million tons of capacity. Then what we are seeing is that there's a number of startup companies showing leadership in the US, and this has mainly been fueled by the Inflation Reduction Act and access to capital markets. Likewise, in the UK, we're showing leadership and working on becoming a champion to recycle EV batteries. The incumbent processes for recycling batteries are predominantly pyrometallurgical, and these came from the recycling of consumer waste such as phone batteries and laptop batteries. Now, the issue with the pyrometallurgical processes are that they're quite inefficient. You can only recover around 40% of the material. That's mainly the nickel and the cobalt. The lithium's lost in the slag. And also what we see is that with European regulations coming, there needs to be a minimum recycled content of lithium from over 80%. So this means that there's new green processing technologies which are needed to retool and create an ecosystem for recycling lithium waste. And actually, we have gigafactory waste. When a gigafactory starts up, the waste can be as high as 40%. When it's running efficiently, it can be around 10%. So there's a huge volume of gigafactory waste which will need recycling in the future. And of course, we have the large volumes of batteries which will come on stream as end-of-life materials later this decade. So in answer to your question around what happens to an EV battery reaching end of life today, essentially it has maybe three fates. It can be repurposed for secondary applications like stationary storage. And as a battery recycler, we're very positive the ecosystem which is being based around secondary storage. Ultimately, those batteries come for recycling. And we have recently taken first generation batteries from secondary applications and recycled those. Alternatively, the material will be recycled by a company such as Altilium. And, we can use hydrometallurgical processes that allows us to recover over 95% of those critical minerals like lithium and nickel and put them back into a supply chain to build new batteries. Or in some parts of the world where there's no regulations, they can end up in landfill due to lack of infrastructure. Now, batteries contain toxic raw materials, so there is no reason that batteries end up in landfill. They contain valuable minerals which we can recover now at high efficiencies and put back into a supply chain. And look, what we are doing at Altilium is to build at scale infrastructure to efficiently reclaim the key minerals like the lithium, the nickel, and the cobalt, and reintegrate them into supply chains so we become less reliant on overseas supply chains, and also we give industrial resilience and energy security to the UK.
I don't have a PhD like you do, but many of our listeners do. So for the answer to this next question, feel free to go as technically as you like. I just might not be able to stay with you. Recycling anything is difficult in this world, but of course batteries is another level. What are you seeing as the main technical challenges when it comes to recycling batteries?
At Altilium, we think around full battery circularity, which includes the cathode material as well as the anode material. And also the, battery recycling, has some complexities. This is connected to the intricate chemistries and structures of modern batteries. But actually what we can do at Altilium is we can take the anode and cathode materials from a waste battery, and we can put them through our eco-cathode process, and we can recover the lithium, the nickel, the cobalt, and the manganese in a salt form. But actually, we go beyond recycling. Actually, we are upcycling and re-engineering into a PCAM and cathode active material, which allows us to, which is the final format for building a new battery. So, and also what work we are doing with some of our automotive OEM partners is we are taking very old chemistries, for example, an NMC 111 from a 10-year-old electric vehicle, and we are recycling, but importantly, upcycling to a very modern chemistry material such as an NMC 811, which is relevant today and would be a chemistry which our customer would build a new battery. One other challenge we have is that we are seeing an increase in LFP chemistry batteries. So, traditionally battery recycling has focused on nickel and cobalt recovery because you have very high payables there. At Altilium, we've been able to recover 97% of the lithium from LFP batteries, and we are today taking LFP batteries from automotive OEMs and energy stationary storage vendors. So actually, one of the secrets we see of recycling LFP batteries is having a payable on the graphite. So most recyclers focus on the cathode material. For the last 2 years, Altilium has been focused on recycling the graphite from old EV batteries, but more importantly, purifying and upcycling the graphite stream so it can go back into the production of anodes, and then we have full circularity in battery recycling. So we're now on our generation 4 material, and the performance of that material is similar to a natural graphite product. And our partner at the moment is producing anodes for testing from the Altilium recycled material. So having a payable on the graphite, because the graphite is maybe 40% of the black mass battery waste which we start processing. Another challenge is that batteries contain toxic and reactive materials such as nickel. So we're having to develop and put in place systems and processes to manage safely those materials, and also how we engage with the Environment Agency in having the correct permits for treatment of those materials. And if we talk around economics of battery recycling, we see battery recycling needs to be done at the largest scale you can and to the highest value component. So this is one of the reasons we don't only recycle, but we upcycle and re-engineer battery metal salts recovered from our process into PCAM and battery-ready cathode active material. So our Teesside plant will be almost mega-scale battery recycling, and that is around a gigafactory complex of battery production which is being built in the UK. We expect there to be by 2030 130 gigawatt hours of battery production in the UK. So when a gigafactory is producing batteries, it produces a significant amount of waste which needs to be efficiently recycled and put back into the supply chain. And also as feedstock, we have the expected high volumes of end-of-life batteries later this decade.
Nice. You alluded to some of your kind of plans and status at the moment. Just to kind of delve a bit deeper into that, I know that one of your goals is to be first to market in the UK and to be doing it at scale. So just kind of expand a little bit more on kind of your current status and how you're progressing. And to be first to market, when realistically does that need to be?
Yeah, we're progressing well towards establishing the UK's first large-scale battery recycling plant in Teesside. One of the challenges of this energy transition is that the capexes are quite large. So we're in the process of completing our Series B raise, and that is focused on commencing the Teesside program. Ultimately, that project will supply around 25% of the UK's cathode active material needed by 2030. So this is one of the largest projects in the European region. Actually, at Altilium, we have a positive sense of urgency. Actually, there is no 2050 for net zero. All of the infrastructure needs to be built by 2030 to support the electrification of the grid and transport to get to net zero. So, our goal is to have at scale capacity for recycling in the UK by 2027, and being first to market is critical as the UK accelerates in EV adoption and the demand for recycled materials continue to rise. We see that the UK is quite a unique market. We're an island. We have quite high adoption of EVs. We have over 1 million EVs in the country. It's the largest secondhand car market in the European region. So, we see that there's a real requirement for battery recycling to support the supply of critical minerals from a domestic viewpoint. So we're not reliant on overseas supply chains. So it gives us industrial resilience. Actually, we're the only company in the... Sorry, let me start again. Altilium is the only company in the UK which is producing cathode active material. For a UK automotive industry, there needs to be a supply of raw materials to gigafactories. So there's a midstream industry, but also and mining in the UK, but there is only one project currently, which is the Altilium project, which is to produce very low carbon, sustainable cathode active material for the electrification here in the UK. And if we ultimately, this story is around decarbonising automotive supply chains. We've recently had an LCA done with Minviro, and our cathode active material produced from recycling gigafactory scrap and end-of-life batteries in the UK versus importing from China, which is the traditional supply chain, has a 74% lower greenhouse gas emissions. Also, in the case of the anode material produced from the Altilium graphite compared to a synthetic anode material from China, we see a 77% lower greenhouse gas emissions. So using recycled material allows our automotive partners to achieve their sustainability goals. We believe that an EV built out of cathode active material from Altilium could have a 25% lower greenhouse gas emission than the existing supply chain for mining and refining. So, ultimately, this is about decarbonizing battery supply chains and decarbonizing transportation. So, all automakers have sustainability targets, for example, 2040 to have, zero carbon electric vehicles. So, Altilium's really supporting that initiative by, producing, very low carbon, eco-friendly battery raw materials to put back into the supply chain.
It's an interesting argument, and you mentioned here to kind of hit all these targets. It's around kind of supply chain and the whole process. And there's talk around in the future, most if not all EV batteries will be made by recycling old ones. Do you agree with that statement? And if so, when do you think this will be a reality?
We have regulatory tailwinds, which is supporting the use of recycled material in new batteries. So the European battery regulation requires by starting 2031 minimum recycled contents of lithium, nickel, and cobalt. So other than the regulatory situation, we see a future at Altilium where there's less mining. By 2040, we expect to see more lithium coming from recycling compared to primary mining. And actually, the CEO of BYD recently said that in China by 2048 there will be no more mining for battery raw materials. It will come from a recycling ecosystem. So, in between now and then, we need a lot of mining, and we need mining with good ESG. But at some point we see that there's enough scrap in the system that allows us to recover these critical minerals in a low carbon and sustainable way to put back into a supply chain. So I think we probably see around mid 2030 a peak in the demand for newly mined raw materials. Recycling can increasingly fulfill the demand for critical minerals like lithium and cobalt. New mining projects will still be necessary to meet the rapid growth of the global EV market. Recycling has a really important part to play in alleviating supply chain pressures here in the UK and giving industrial resilience and energy security. And something which we're really focused on at Altilium is to build, a battery ecosystem here in the UK. And, we're developing green processing technologies, UK technology, and we're scaling up and creating infrastructure. So we have jobs and we have the critical minerals required for the energy transition. At the moment in the UK, battery recycling predominantly looks like, shredding end-of-life batteries and creating black mass. Now, that black mass is predominantly exported to countries like India, China, Korea. What we are doing at Altilium is, processing black mass and keeping it in a UK battery supply chain, and adding value here in the UK. We see that these critical minerals, or battery waste, is almost a strategic asset of the UK. We believe that it should stay in the UK and support the energy transition and the movement from a fossil fuel based energy system to a mineral based energy system.
Just to touch on some of your comments there, I was reading about the prediction of the mining of raw materials to peak by the mid 2030s, which I think is super important. We'd always talk about the demand on the battery manufacturing industry and how that's going to grow over the years to come. Before moving into batteries, I used to work in the mining industry, so did a lot of work in mining, and obviously a huge talking point and a huge focus was on lithium, which is typically coming from the likes of Argentina, Australia, Chile, and to look at supply chains and where everything's coming from, and the mining companies, they have their net zero targets as well to hit, but ultimately to support this infrastructure, I think recycling, as you say, plays a critical role in all of this. And I've got to mention as well, Christian, you're our first UK guest on the show as well, so it's a privilege to be talking to a fellow Brit, and hopefully if this goes well, which it kind of needs to, it's a privilege to have you on. Before we get into questions from the community, we have a few from them. A final question from me is, if you were to paint a perfect picture of how Altilium will look in 5 years' time?
Yeah, that's a great question. In 5 years' time, I envision Altilium is operating a state-of-the-art recycling plant in Teesside. We'll be processing over 150,000 EV batteries per year. We will be supplying domestic low carbon battery materials to UK gigafactories. We would have created over 500 highly skilled jobs. and we would have established a sustainable supply chain for the UK's EV industry. I see us also continuing advancing our innovation in recycling technologies, and also increasing our strategic partnerships with cell manufacturers, automotive OEMs, and other stakeholders in the battery supply chain to further strengthen our position in the market.
Good luck with that journey. Hopefully that is a picture that becomes a reality.
We're part of the UK battery ecosystem, which is being built. We see the UK is probably the best place in the world to have a battery startup. We've had really great support from the UK government in terms of Innovate UK, the Advanced Propulsion Centre, the Faraday Battery Challenge. They've allowed us to, develop green processing technologies for recycling, which are needed for the energy transition. And also they've allowed us and supported us to scale up these technologies. We've been able to build a pilot line in Devon in the southwest of the UK. We're also finalizing our first mini commercial plant processing 1 EV battery per day, again in Devon. So, and we continue to have support as we move forward and build at scale recycling infrastructure from other stakeholders in the UK. So as Altilium, we're showing leadership here in creating green processing technologies and building at scale recycling infrastructure. But we have a number of stakeholders, including the UK government, which allows us to kind of speed up and scale up battery recycling, which is needed in the UK.
Yeah, definitely. The UK has had mixed press over recent years on, in terms of the advancements in battery production, battery manufacturing. And yeah, I mean, we're in a perfect position really to achieve things and contribute to the whole ecosystem. So yeah, hopefully in the next 5 years, we're going to see a boost.
The Faraday Battery Challenge and the Advanced Propulsion Centre has been transformational for Altilium. At the moment, we have a key project for us. We are producing cathode active material for supply to the UK BIC, which is the UK Battery Industrialisation Centre, and they're building cells from our recycled cathode active material, and those cells will be passed to an automotive OEM for validation. So for the first time in the UK, we are truly closing the supply chain on EV batteries and having a circular economy for EV batteries. So, we're really advancing forward in how we show that recycled materials perform in an industrial environment with an automaker.
So just a few questions from the community now, Christian. The first one being, with battery manufacturers producing products that have longer and longer lifetimes, is there a concern for future feedstock availability to keep operations like Altilium profitable?
Yeah, so one of the challenges we have in battery recycling, and I mentioned it's around scale. We almost have to build a battery recycling plant at the next size up. So what we do know is that later this decade, there will be, volumes of end-of-life batteries coming online that need recycling. And also we will have gigafactories in the UK. And as I mentioned, they will produce scrap that needs recycling. So in the early days, and if battery lifetimes are extended, raw materials can be tight or feedstock could be tight. But actually, our Teesside plant is also designed to take a primary raw material product. Of course, Altilium is a sustainable raw material supplier, and any primary nickel MHP, which is added to a recycling plant, must have very strong ESG credentials, produced from renewable energy. But for any shortage in scrap in the early days of battery recycling, imbalances of availability of material, or even quality of material, we can add in the short term primary raw material. And as we move forward, into the next decade, we see that the predominant feedstock moves from production scrap to end of life batteries. Also an interesting trend we see is that for scrap is that we call them premature failure batteries. So these are essentially batteries which are sitting at scrap yards, which have been involved in automotive accidents, and in some cases have been written off with limited damage to or no damage to a battery. So we're taking batteries today from scrap yards as well as automotive OEMs and energy stationary storage vendors. So we see that this energy transition not only for EVs but for renewable energy platforms is going to require a lot of batteries as we go forward. So we're confident on the volumes of scrap being available for battery recycling, and also we're confident on the value proposition of recycling, and also the regulatory requirements for recycling.
In short, feedstock hopefully shouldn't be an issue. Second question, with strong recycling operations established in China, how does Altilium plan to compete on a global scale?
Today, there's a lot of talk around, Chinese dominance of an EV battery supply chain, and also there's talk of decoupling from China in an EV battery supply chain. From a recycling viewpoint, we see that currently the Chinese market is a self-contained market. It's very hard to compete with that Chinese supply chain from a cost viewpoint. But how we can compete is from a carbon viewpoint. As I've mentioned, our recycled battery cathode active material is 74% lower than a Chinese product coming into the UK. So ultimately, this is around decarbonising supply chains. We even see in the future there could be a green premium for recycled battery materials. So, we see, early next decade basis, a domestic supply chain, low carbon raw material, and the regulatory requirements requiring recycled material in new batteries, that green premium could exist, and it could be as high as 20%. I think the other way we can compete with China is around technology. So essentially at Altilium, we're recycling end of life batteries, and we're recovering the lithium and the nickel and the cobalt in a metal salt form. But actually, we go beyond recycling. What we are doing is, upcycling and re-engineering to, a very high modern chemistry CAM, for example, NMC 811 and beyond. So how we've developed, green processing technologies to be able to do that, I think is a real differentiator compared to what is happening in the Chinese market. And also we see that the foundation of Altilium is green processing technologies. So we're actually a clean technology company. So we're spending a lot of time in future-proofing our technologies, for example, being able to process graphite so we get the maximum payables in all products for battery recycling. So I think we will continue to differentiate ourselves from a technology development viewpoint. And, ultimately what we will do at Altilium is develop green processing technologies, and then we move on and we're building the physical infrastructure to recycle these batteries and put the materials back into a supply chain.
Yeah, as you were saying, decarbonising the supply chain is, I think, super important. Obviously, there's so many raw materials now available in the UK. I think that's why it's important for the whole battery ecosystem to do more in the UK, because, as you say, it needs to kind of rely on each other, and we don't need to import anymore. And just kind of makes everything way more sustainable. So, very interesting. Final question from the community and of today's episode. How critical is the need for a solid recycling infrastructure for used batteries? What will be the ramifications if recycling solutions don't keep pace with battery production over the coming years and decades?
Essentially, battery recycling is needed because end-of-life batteries can't go to landfill because they have toxic chemicals. So, an EV battery recycling industry allows us to keep those minerals in the UK. It reduces dependence on foreign supply chains, some with not so good ESG. And also it allows us to build new industries. Essentially this energy transition is creating new opportunities for the UK for jobs and technology developments and industrial resilience as we move from a fossil fuel based energy system to a mineral based energy system. So, a battery recycling industry is going to be key to support UK industrial resilience as we move forward. Without a domestic supply of raw materials, and a battery recycling industry could supply 50% of the UK's lithium by 2040. The UK would be exposed to overseas supply chains, which have volatility on pricing, and also we have seen that some overseas suppliers look at restricting the export of raw materials for a number of reasons. So a battery recycling industry, we could almost say, is important and strategic for the UK's energy independence and industrial resilience.
Well, Christian, it's been a pleasure to welcome you onto the show today. Super interesting topic, something I'm very passionate about, actually. We talk about all areas of the value chain, but this one I see as really, really interesting. So good luck with the journey. Good luck with the Series B raise as well. Hopefully, the UK battery infrastructure will be very strong in the next few years.
Yeah, and thank you for your kind words, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.